All right, let me know. Welcome back to UPress Play, a sports show produced by FAU Student Media. We are live streaming on OwlTV's YouTube and no Owl Radio today due to technical difficulties, but we move. I'm JD, joined alongside me are Maddox, Megan, and Cameron, and I'm alive. We're back. I was out for the past week. Megan held it down, so shout out to you guys. How was the show, without your boy? How'd it go?
It went okay. There was a little, first time hosting, little errors, but overall it was good.
Yeah, no, you held it down for sure. I was watching it sickly in bed. Cameron actually just asked me before we started. He's like, "Yo, bro, like, what'd you have?" And I think like that's like such a funny thing to be like actually having to like be careful to ask people about now.
I mean, it was on IR for like, it was forever, it felt like. But no, we did, I think we held it down. Like you said, Megan, first time hosting, I think she did really well. One thing is though, like, we had so much more room.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
the extra
Really?
room was nice.
It was
yeah.
nice. I felt like I could stretch out, but it's good to have you back, man.
Oh no, I appreciate it. Definitely, I miss being on the show, and I hope that it's like riding a bike, and we just smooth transition. But like we usually do with every single show, we're gonna get into our FAU housekeeping segment. Definitely a lot for me to catch up on since I've been gone for the past week, and we're back. But yeah, we're gonna recap the Shula Bowl. FAU gets their first win of the season, 38-20 against their South Florida rivals, the Florida International Panthers, making them 7-time back-to-back Shula Bowl champions. The weather sucked for that game. Absolutely,
It was awful.
Awful. That was the one game that I decided. I was like, if there's one game in my final semester at FAU, because I do plan on graduating in December, I was like, if there's any game that I'm going to go to as a fan for the one time, it's got to be the Shula Bowl. And I was like, let me go to a tailgate for the first time and, see what the vibes were like. Got rained on. Gross. And then the game got delayed 2 hours. And at that point, me and the group that I was with, we just ended up watching it from the crib. Not real fans, but yeah.
No, it's fine. I did the same thing.
Really?
Yeah, I went to the tailgate and then I wanted to go to the game and then it was raining, so we
No,
just
yeah,
left.
they weren't letting people into the stands because of the fear of the thunder, which made sense. And it looked like it was actually a really good turnout. Like it looked like if the weather would have held up, it would have been a really, really dope game.
It definitely would have been like significantly more, especially the student section. But I, as an FAU student, am proud of how many students still pulled up, stayed under like the, whatever you want to call it, like the gangway of the stadium, because they couldn't be in their seats. But there was a large chunk of that student section that showed up for the original kickoff time, stuck it out and still showed back up. So I think it was with the 2-hour rain delay, as good of a fan turnout, I think. At least in the beginning, I will say like a good chunk of the student section left at halftime, but after probably it'd been like 4 hours they'd been there and the game was pretty much decided at halftime. I can understand that. So it definitely was a pretty good turnout, I think, for the second home game of the year.
Yeah, it's really interesting how like in years past the problem was that the games were too early and so it was too hot and the students weren't making it out to the games, and now the problem is that we're having them later, which leaves more room for weather to end up being a problem. But yeah, I think given the circumstances, people showed up. But I just think it's always like, I've always said this about FAU Stadium is like, I wonder why they just decided to make it so large when it was first built, because there's been very few times in our school history that we've seen it absolutely filled. And in my personal experience, the game was its largest when we played, I believe, UCF last season.
Yes, it was sold out. That game. That game was a lot of fun to go to.
Yeah.
Season before last.
Season
It
before
was
last.
my
yeah.
freshman.
Yep.
Yeah, that was,
ago.
and that was, if I remember correctly, that was a game that it rained
As well.
before
Yeah.
too. Yeah. So I mean,
But
I
there
think,
was also a lot of UCF fans that drove down.
True. I'm interested to see if it's like the same way when USF comes to town. I don't know how
Yeah.
many weeks away that is.
Well, the classes on that Friday got canceled. Like if they're
Really?
After,
I did not know that.
If they're after 1 or 2, they're canceled that day.
Huge FAUW. Wow, I had no idea about that. What's the date?
November 1st, which falls on a Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense why they would.
I did
cancel
not. Wow, I
classes.
did not know they canceled classes. Football school. Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. But yeah, no, that's another game where FAU really has to pack it out so it's not like 50-50.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But once again, FAU taking care of business against the Shula Bowl. We honestly, it's funny, when we did our staff predictions on the show, we ended up actually having way higher expectations than we did on our articles. And we pretty much predicted that we'd be 3-0 by now, and we are not. FAU secures their first win of the season with FIU. And I think for that game, it's kind of, what's the word? Like an exhale for everybody on the team.
Oh, definitely. I mean, just by, like, we were just talking about the fan base that still stuck out with the rain delay, it shows how important that game was for the fans. And I feel like if FAU lost that game, their fan support for the rest of the season would have been kind of shot.
Yeah, no, I think it was a big game for the fans, but I think it's definitely a big game for everybody in that locker room. Thinking about the transfers that were coming in, especially Cam Fancher, who comes in from Marshall and is, kind of expected to lead the team. You can't come into new territory, new school, and lose the big rivalry game. Also thinking about Tom Herman playing in his first Shula Bowl. This is a game that he really needed, not only to kind of justify, his being here as the head coach, but there's also really never been too many head coaches in FAU football history that have lost a Shula Bowl. And I know that he definitely didn't plan on being the first. So definitely a much needed win for him. Looking at the box score, MVP of the game, Zubiri Mobley, I hope I'm saying that correctly, 134 rushing yards on 20 carries for a 6.7 yard average, 3 rushing touchdowns, which all came in the first half, which I believe was some sort of record.
It's I want to say, I don't have the exact stat in front of me. I want to say it was the first time an FAU player has had 3 touchdowns in a game in like 4 seasons, I want to say. I remember it was Malcolm Davidson was the last one. I don't remember if it was in 2019 or 2020.
It was 2020. I do remember seeing the stat, but I didn't know if it was like specific to the first half or just 3 rushing touchdowns in general. But regardless, like even if some of them were kind of like those tush push kind of touchdowns where they were right there at the 1 yard line, like that's still just an absolutely monster stat line. Also 120 total yards from CJ Campbell. I believe around 67 of those were on the ground and the rest of them were receptions. And he had 1 rushing touchdown himself. Another interesting stat, which I think is, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this. 10 different players with at least 1 reception on the offense, which I think, was a big question kind of coming into the season of who was going to be that number 1 guy. But potentially this offense is just next man up. We usually don't see that with college football. It's more so like a thing that I feel like they say in college basketball, where a guy steps out of the lineup either due to injury or his minutes get cut and another guy steps up and you have a different big performance every night. Maybe that could be the case for this receiving room. But I just thought that was a really interesting stat because you barely see 10 players in rotation in a receiving room, let alone 10 players getting a catch on the game. And then FIU with 5 turnovers on the game, all forced from the defense, and FAU playing a clean game with 0 turnovers. So, Maddox, I want to throw it to you. Just overall thoughts on the game and thoughts on the performance. Do you feel like this is something that FAU can really build upon, or do you kind of just feel like this is something that FAU should just move on from and look towards the next game?
This definitely should continue on from this. And I mentioned that in my prediction for this game against UConn, because looking at how UConn plays, average about 30 points per game, but also they allow about 31 points per game. So going on the road in Connecticut, luckily enough early on where it's not too cold up north, will be beneficial to them. But I do feel like this game is really important to them getting their first win, having the guys trust one another that they can get this done, but also just a refresher of seeing how the offense previous 2 games play awful. Now they started the game against FIU a little bit off on a couple of drives, both 3 and out, but then immediately switched when FAU's defense turned over for the first time in that game. So I think it's a very important game for not important game for FAU, but I feel like it was very beneficial for FAU. That is a turning point.
Yeah, I think it's something that can definitely be built upon, but I think definitely I've always been like big on just like having a short memory when it comes to this. You know, they're smoking cigars in the locker room and celebrating their win. I don't know. What do you think about that, Cam? Kind of,
I think it's awesome.
You think it's awesome?
It's a rival. I think it's.
It's a game you won a trophy for. So
I
in
would
my
say
head,
it's like
I'm like
rivalries are very, very important to like the culture of college football. So even if it's like not like the most storied rivalry, or it's just like so early in the season, I can appreciate that. You know, they care enough to like celebrate like that. I'd be more concerned, you know, if they weren't celebrating, you know, and didn't have like all the good vibes like associated with, you know, a big rivalry win. As far as the game though, I think you guys kind of hit all of it. The running game was dominating all night, and that opened up some windows in the passing game. And then on the other side of the ball on defense, you know, just relentless pressure all night really forced them. And their quarterback, who I was really high on going into that game, they really forced them into a lot of mistakes. They kept the offense aside from that like early drive, which, you know, had me shaken up in the press box. Besides that early drive, defense looked lights out. You know, they did give up those 2 touchdowns at the end, but by then it was pretty much all backups in the game, at least like in the secondary. However, I don't think, to answer the kind of question you gave Maddox, they need to have kind of a short memory about this because, you know, all the good vibes and like smoking cigars and party, once that's over, I'm sure like the reality set back in that, you know, you're 1-2, you're already behind in the conference standings because you've had a conference game when a lot of other AAC teams haven't. And more important than all of that, even with that win, there's still holes on this team because even with, you know, Zuberi Mobley going for 120 and CJ Campbell going for 50, you're not going to get that every game. And still, there were so many points left on the field via the passing game, in my opinion. You know, I can think of several just mishaps in the passing game, whether that be, you know, a couple times where Cam Fancher and the receiver weren't on the same page. And other times it was just simple where they had open looks a lot of times and Cam Fancher just, you know, couldn't hit them. There was one, I forget which tight end was. He was running, you know, naked up the seam. There was not anyone within 5 yards with him, and they just couldn't connect. So all that's to say that they should have a short memory because there's a lot to build on, and I don't think that UConn is necessarily like a cupcake type game. I think we might have looked at the beginning of the season, looked at UConn and like looked at that as like almost like a gimme game. But with all that FAU has shown to fix, I don't think so. I think that, you know, you're gonna have to stop the run. That's one thing UConn does really well, especially on offense. Their passing game has been very shaky to start. Their quarterback missed week 2. But they have shown ability to run the ball really efficiently. So if the defense can, you know, stop the run and put a lot of pressure on Nick Evers, who is UConn's quarterback, I think they have a chance to be successful. But even if all that does happen, the offense has so much left to prove that even if the defense is, again, playing lights out, you need something. You need a wake-up week. You need to see something from your offense. And I hope this is the week that they do it. I know I've been talking a lot, but
no, yeah, let them cook.
You know, it's just we haven't seen anything from this passing game through 3 weeks, and you're running out of time. I feel like if you're kind of like the offensive coordinator and you're Cam Fancher.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the UConn Huskies are coming off a 26-21 loss to Duke University. Both these teams are sitting at 1-2 in the standings. And yeah, as you mentioned, FAU is already behind in the standings when it comes to AAC play, being that that game against Army was a conference game. So they're 0-1 in AAC play. So definitely need to win the non-conference games that when we had looked at the schedule at the beginning of the show, we all kind of were in agreement that these are pretty not necessarily easy, but very winnable non-conference games that are supposed to be your ride to a bowl game, because that's the expectations that we set. I remember, and I'm gonna pull this clip and see if we upload it, where you said that 6-6 should be the floor for this FAU football team.
And again, like, I don't think I've moved off that. Like, their chances at 6-6 maybe aren't as great, like where we are now, than before the season. But like, the fact doesn't change. They play one of the easiest schedules in football. I still don't think 6-6 is a big ask, even from where they are now.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely why I'm not trying to even when you're in the middle of the game and you're in the heat of it, I really wasn't trying to overreact to the explosive play. I mean, the explosive plays are awesome, like especially when you see when Mobley hits that gap and he's running wild free for the 78-yard touchdown. Like that's great to see and all, but like you said, it's not going to be something that we should be expecting every week in and week out. So these wins, it seems like are pretty much going to have to be a dogfight, no pun intended, with the Huskies. But like every game is going to be a dogfight for the Owls, and it makes for interesting football. But there's definitely, as we've seen with the Army game, there's definitely a strong possibility that FAU gets punched in the mouth and blown out. So it'll definitely be interesting to see. UConn's definitely they're coming off that collapse loss to Duke. They were winning 21-17, but then Duke came back in the fourth quarter. So they have some inconsistencies with their quarterback. Like you said, I believe their quarterback was injured, and then
I want to say it was a head injury that he sat out their week 2 game. And then has been up and down through their week 1 blowout loss at Maryland. But I think their offense, even though they've kind of struggled through 2 weeks, at least in that game, I didn't get to catch the entire thing. I only saw like bits and pieces of it at Duke. They've shown the ability to move the ball, and those are against like Power 4 opponents. I imagine that they'll look a lot better versus FAU's defense, more comfortable, just like via the fact that it's week 4 and not week 1, than they have in the first 2 weeks. So all that's back, like all this is again to say it, like it's not exactly like a shoo-in type win for FAU. I definitely would have them favorited, but it's a game that they're going to have to be better than they were against FIU, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. So, like we do after talking about every single football game, being that it's Friday and the game's tomorrow, we're going to give our predictions. If we're allowed to, Maddox, are you broadcasting this game?
No, because it's a road game.
All right. So, Megan has her prediction that she has from our staff prediction article, which you can read online at UPressOnline.com. We have staff predictions that go up every Friday. And you can check those out. So Megan, tell the people what you had cooking for this one.
So for my staff prediction this time around, I think that FAU is going to win, but like you guys just said, it's not going to be an easy game. So I have FAU at 24 and UConn at 21. I feel like we've seen now that FAU, they can score, like they can put up points. They put up 38 in the last game. So if it can kind of continue with that offensive flow, and I really liked them finally using Mobley. Like I believe I wrote in here, like in his first 2 games against Michigan State and Army, he only had like
13 carries.
He had 13 carries in those 2 games, and then in this one game against FIU, he had 20, and he scored 3 touchdowns. So was it because of FIU's defense or like the skill set? You never know, but now he showed he can run the ball, so they need to try to start using that. I feel like they need to start being more like the whole 10 different receivers makes me nervous, because it's like, okay, it's the 3rd game of the season, and why haven't they kind of figured out at least like 4 solid guys that they could kind of utilize rather than having to go to 10 different people. But now the run game, it's like, okay, you see someone that's having success compared to the other running backs that the team has. So if they kind of stick with that and learn from there, I think that they'll do pretty well.
Before you take it, Maddox, I think, and I kind of agree with you on this point, that it might be more of a con that they had 10 receivers go for a catch. versus FIU, because again, kind of like what Megan said, by now you think you'd have like someone that like stepped, not only like took on those catches that you lost from last season, but like stepped into that like wide receiver one role where like on a 3rd and long or a red zone situation, like, oh, we know we can dial something up for him and he's going to make a play. Because of those 10 receivers that caught a pass, the 2 leading receivers were running backs.
Yes, that is correct.
That to me is a signal that you really can't move the ball well through the air. And if like you turn on the tape, a lot of Cam Fancher's completions are checkdowns behind the line of scrimmage, screen passes. So I really agree, like kind of what you're saying, that while it is maybe a good thing that we're starting to learn we can ride run behind Zuberi Mobley a lot. I think it's more a sign that like the passing game has to step up. So I agree with you in that sense.
Yeah, looking at the stat sheet, CJ Campbell led the team with receptions, 4 receptions for 59 yards, and then number 2 was indeed Zuberi Mobley with 2 receptions.
And I'll say if it's like
that makes 8. That makes 8 different receivers that had at least 1 catch.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing, I'd say, spreading the ball around. But when your 2 leading receivers
our running backs
are only catching the ball out of the backfield. And it's CJ Campbell had 4, and how much did Zuberi? That's like dang near half of your receptions are coming out of the backfield. That's not going to be an efficient way to move the ball. Eventually, you're going to have to drop back, make a read, and push the ball downfield. So like yes, you could like to that stat line, you could take like the thought like, oh man, that's a positive, they're spreading the ball around, but I think Megan was kind of hinting at it.
Kind of a negative.
That'd be more like. By now you want to have a running back that stepped up. You saw it Saturday. By now you'd hope you have one of your you'd have like a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, or at least like one wide receiver who's averaging kind of like 50 or 60 a game, because that's what CJ got. So just the fact that we're not seeing that from the receivers yet. I
think you showed signs.
Yeah.
Like Omari Hayes has looked, I think, great on all his catches so far. He looks really, really good, like after the catch in particular. But we really have yet to see like a true, dominant wide receiver 1 emerge, which I wonder.
And so I pulled up FAU's 56-14 win against South Florida last year, because I remember one of my major critiques about last year's football team was that I felt like the offense was so LeJontay Wester heavy, and I am
as like a bad thing, you mean?
Yeah, as a bad thing, because I think when you game plan to feed the ball to one guy, it's very easy to take that guy out of the equation if you're a somewhat capable defensive coordinator. But then now, being with this new football team, we see that there's yet to be a number 1 guy step up. So I think,
which is exactly why when you have a guy like LeJontay, I think you do have to like essentially like play through him, because like on the other hand of that, if a defensive coordinator is like really, keyed in on stopping like LeJontay Wester per se, like this week, that's going to open up opportunities for other receivers.
Yep. Tony Johnson had 8 receptions for 131 yards and a touchdown that game.
Exactly. So when you have, LeJontay Wester, I'm sorry, you guys don't have the stats in front of you, going for 10, that opens up. They have to start keying in on him, and that opens up for Tony Johnson. And I'd argue the fact that you don't have, one guy who's drawing like a majority of the defense's attention. Maybe that's why like it's like 1-1-1-1-1.
Just like we pretty much like playing like backyard football and just seeing who gets open instead of actually running your sets and offense and being like, all right, the ball is going to go to this guy. But that's also been a major critique of Cam Fancher when you listen to the broadcast of the FAU football games, is that he's making very obvious reads. And listen, I'm not going to stand up here on my soapbox and say that I could play any football better than Cam. He's probably the best that we've got. But there definitely needs to be some sort of conversation within this offense of who are we going to get consistently involved in the game. I think we've seen that Jay-Sean Platt has the ability to be that guy, but I think it's just a matter of if they're dialing up plays and if he's getting open, because then that's another thing is there's so many equations with football, especially when you're dealing with running an offense. Is if the pass protection can hold up, all right. If the pass protection holds up, can the quarterback make the read? And if the quarterback can make the read, is the guy even open? There's so many different pieces to this equation that
you're exactly right. But I don't think the problem is like guys getting open. I kind of like mentioned it. There was plenty, I think, of times. I can think of specific examples of times where he just had guys open, targeted them, and it just, was like at their feet or airmailed it. So like that doesn't even account for like the times where, he does have a guy open and is just like not delivering the ball, or he does have a guy open, he just doesn't have the time. So I don't think like, I'm like just not gonna dance around it. Like I think like a lot of like their problems as an offense boil down to him to like dropping back and being able to deliver accurate passes on a pass-to-pass basis. So I think that if you want to like diagnose one thing, if we were like talking about is it the offensive line? Oh, is it like receivers getting open? Oh, is it him delivering the ball? I think it'd be like him like delivering the ball, because we can point to so many times where he had open receivers and just like it doesn't come together.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll have to see if this UConn game can be the game that something kind of the switch gets flipped. But
as far as a score prediction, I know we kind of got off track.
Let's get into that.
I'd say 24-21.
Yeah.
What I said.
Oh, is that what? I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, I feel like that's a pretty reasonable score.
That's an accurate, like, it's just.
I just feel like they like kind of just like recap what all we've been talking about. They will probably, it'll be like probably a 15-17 carry game for Zuberi Mobley, and I think sort of similar to what we saw against FIU, that'll open up some more opportunities in the pass game. From what I've seen, though, I don't think they're going to light up every single one of those opportunities for like a 48-point, a 35-point game. I think they'll be there behind a strong running game. We'll have to see if the offense is, taking advantage of all of them. But my guess would be like a lot of them still go unrealized, a lot of those opportunities, and it's a mid to low scoring game, about 24-21. Thanks.
I have an uneducated guess. I want to shoot out.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go FAU with a dub, and I'm going to go 35-31 in favor of FAU.
35 points? Do you think so?
Just because I think in the staff prediction, John Burke mentioned that they have a star receiver over there at UConn. So, if some explosive plays can happen on UConn, FAU's gonna, maybe that is the scenario and the occasion that'll force this offense to really find its footing, is a matter of responding to UConn and their points. Because like Maddox has mentioned before, and in his staff prediction, you can't always rely on the defense to bail you out with plays. You can't always rely on a muffed punt from the other team to give you great field position and run in a 5-yard run. Or, you can't rely on the defense to get a 3 and out and give you great field position on the 50-yard line. There's going to be points where you're going to have the ball on the 10-yard line and you need to go put together a 90-yard drive. And I think it's going to have to be one of those push and shove scenarios where their back is going to be against the wall and they're going to need to respond. And I just think to give the team the benefit of the doubt, I don't think this is a team or a head coach that wants to be 1-3 on the season. I think if you can go through a month of football and be at 500, obviously you dropped a very winnable Michigan State game, which, I mean, not many people pegged you to win, but the fact that, you were so close, I think it leaves an even more sour taste in your mouth that game was so winnable. And then you lose a game against Army that, should have been one of the easier games to game plan for, knowing that it's, you're really only dealing with a triple option offense here. I think if they can come into this game with that attitude that they can, after a month of football, come in at 500, I think they'll be able to get it done. And I'm just hoping for a high-scoring game for the sake of the fans and for the sake of the people that want to see a little bit more entertainment. And hopefully this offense can use this opportunity of a high-scoring game to kind of, figure out who their guys are. Yeah. That's where I'm at with it. So, Maddox, you want to offer anything?
No, I think you guys did a good job describing it. I will also pick FAU to win 28-24.
All right. So Maybe we'll be back on our new Showtime, which we'll get to at the end of the show. But maybe we'll be back and we'll all look silly. But hopefully not, and we get to talk about an FAU dub. Moving over onto basketball, the men's basketball team on Tuesday from 2 to 3 held their first open practice for students only at the Eleanor R. Baldwin Arena. About 100 students came. Maybe a little bit less, but 100 students were offered red T-shirts that said "Defend Paradise," and the players just had an open practice. Full attendance from all the players. We got to see some action from returning players like Trey Carroll, and we also got to see action from pretty much a majority of new transfers: Baba Miller, Ken Evans Jr., and Leland Walker. Me and Megan got to go.
Yeah, we got to
we weren't there on assignment. We were more so there to scope out the scene because we knew we were going to want to talk about it on the show. I took some notes, but before I get into my notes, Megan, I just want from your perspective in your seat, what did you see and what were you kind of liking from what you were seeing about the team?
Well, what I told Gianna was they look so much more athletic than last year. Like, not to obviously rip on like.
Nah, they all left. They all left.
So I guess I could, but like when I was watching all these new guys, I'm like, this looks like a team that would compete, because I feel like, 2022, 2023, those rosters, like, yeah, we went to the Final Four and stuff, but everyone was kind of like, these guys going to the Final Four, like they just, now this season, the team has height, which will be helpful, finally having some taller guys. I mean, Baba Miller's 6'11", and he was playing two big guys in the lineup for either side. They did like a little like a 5v5 scrimmage, and then we got to see that, and then they transitioned from 5v5 to like a full court scrimmage. So it was really just nice to see kind of the flow, and obviously it was a practice, so they weren't playing with the level of intensity that they would be for a typical game. But I liked what we saw from these guys. The one thing that, if you're trying to learn the new players and their names, some of the names are kind of confusing.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to ask Genesis. Usually when you go to the roster, they'll have like the little button that you can press the ear, and it'll tell you how to pronounce it.
Does it not have it yet?
No, I don't think it does. So we'll definitely have to talk to her and figure out how to pronounce the names.
For those of you that don't know, we have now Montas, and he is from Lithuania, and then we have a Matas, and he is from Lithuania as well. Wait.
Yep.
Yes, they're both from Lithuania, and one has an N in his name, and the other one has a T.
Yeah.
So
that definitely won't be confusing.
No, yeah. We'll definitely have to be really locked in. Two guys from Lithuania named Matas and Montas, but both dogs.
No, they were both like amazing. So it was good to see that. It's just definitely, if you're a fan, and even for me, I have to relearn everyone's names now, and I'm working on that.
No, that was definitely us. We had the rosters pulled up on our phones as we were watching practice, and thank God that they had their practice jerseys on.
They had their numbers on.
So the numbers lined up with the names. But if there was any two standouts that I would say that the fans should definitely be looking out for, it would be Caleb Glenn, sophomore transfer from Louisville, and Max Langenfield, a sophomore from Germany. Me and Megan were talking about it. Caleb Glenn, this guy can absolutely jump out the gym. There was one play where they were doing, it was pretty much they were working on pick and roll defense. Or actually, no, I lied. It was the full court practice that they were working on. And Caleb Glenn was like on the right wing. He was a little bit behind the play. And they were running the pick and roll, and whoever the point guard was went to throw up a lob, and he literally blocked the lob, like smacked it off the glass. So, I did a little digging from his film in his first year at Louisville, and he showed those same flashes where he was a little bit of an undersized guard that kind of played that forward position simply because he had to. And yeah, man, I don't know if I necessarily have a comp for him right now, but I mean, the dude has long arms. He's extremely athletic, and I want to say he's a little bit tall. He's definitely taller. At least he's listed at 6'7", but looking at him on the court, he's taller than Elijah Martin and John Al Davis. So a little familiarity as far as the athleticism goes. But he's kind of like just one of those all-around tool guys that can set strong screens and also be there on the roll. But he definitely showed some flashes of being able to handle the ball on the outside.
And he kind of showed his 3 strength as well.
Absolutely.
You know, he showed his defensive, but then when it was time for him to actually shoot the ball, he was able to put it away as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one guy that I'm definitely interested in looking at, simply because he seems to be kind of a well-rounded, all-around player.
I included it in my article, but I spoke to him when I did the men's conference or non-conference overview, and he said to expect them to be a top 25 team.
Do you guys think that this could be a top 25 team based on what we've looked at with the non-conference schedule? Obviously, you know, this is something that AP voters vote on, you know, to pretty much have to build a team from scratch. Some of these are coming from Power 4 conference. Some of these student athletes are coming from Power 4 schools. Some of these are also from Group of 5 schools. But, I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that statement?
No, not a top 25 team, I don't think. Just because, and that's not and I'm saying that because we have no idea anything about this team whatsoever, besides, like we're saying, their names, maybe. And I think after just watching last season, and I'm going to use Memphis as an example, it's very, 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 very hard to piece together a team in one offseason and win immediately. And to get into the top 25, this team would have to essentially win immediately just because of their schedule early on. And, you know, I just don't want to say that yet. I don't think, if I had to make a prediction, I'd say that there's probably going to be like some growing pains associated with, you know, 9 of the 13 being new guys. So I just think it's just totally way too premature to be, you know, making, and I get why Caleb Glenn. I'd hope he's projecting. I'd hope he's projecting that they're a top 25 team. You know, that's what he's supposed to be saying.
Yeah.
But I just think it's just way too early. And maybe call me what you want, please. But I just think there's probably, if I had to call it right now, 25 better teams out there in the country, and that's not a dig at FAU at all.
So FAU will be 26.
I'm not. I didn't say it. I'm not saying no. I just think it's just very early. It's a completely new team. They will probably figure it out, I believe, in Jacobs as a coach. But it's a task for any coach to piece together an entire new roster in 7 months, whatever it is, and win immediately. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, definitely a good point, and I will say that FAU is probably not going to get the benefit of the doubt by voters anymore.
No, they won't.
You know, a lot of the AP rankings last year was predicated on that Final Four run, and
I'm glad you bring that up, because like the AP, I'm not even saying that, like, or I guess kind of I am saying, but like
it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to speak for you, but it doesn't matter.
You're kind of right. It doesn't, but it's like a lot of bias in there, and you know, until this roster here proves themselves, you know, all like the big national talking heads are gonna use that like against them. Oh, it's a completely new roster. Oh, a completely new coach. Oh, all this newness. People are gonna hold that against them until, you know, they go out and prove themselves. Which, you know, like you said, their non-conference schedule, they have plenty of opportunity to do so early on.
Absolutely. But yeah, what I did want to get into as far as another standout player from practice, Max Langenfeld, sophomore from Germany. I had spoke to Jacobs because when we were at the practice, it seemed like there was kind of a main group that was getting a lot of the work in regards to working on their offensive sets. And that lineup was Leland Walker, who is the transfer from Eastern Kentucky, Ken Evans Jr., redshirt senior from Jackson State.
Excited to watch him.
Max Langenfeld, sophomore from Germany. Matas, I'm not gonna try. Should I try? No, I'm not gonna try. No, Vakita. No, I'm good. Matas, sophomore from Lithuania, and then Baba Miller. You know, is he a junior? Junior from Florida State. I asked him, you know, after the practice, because after practice was over, he spoke to the students in the stands and, you know, said thanks for showing love. You know, he actually mentioned after the fact that, you know, one of the reasons he came here was because, you know, there's been 21 straight sellouts and the last 12 home games have all been wins, and that apparently FAU was voted a top 25 student section in college basketball. Not sure which poll that was, but honestly, I'll believe it. So, he talked about how impressive the student section was. And so after the fact, once the practice was over, people got to walk around, kind of just work the room, talk to coach, talk to the assistant coaches. And I asked them after the game, I was like, hey, I saw that Leland, Ken, Max, Matas, and Baba were getting a lot of work together. Does this maybe a projected starting lineup? And what he told me was that it's not even close, which understandably so, because you probably won't have a starting lineup probably even the night before your first game, being that we're early into September and they don't play their first game of the season until November. So, but it'll definitely be interesting to see, because when we had our interview with him before the summer, before we even knew most of the players that were committed, he did mention that he does want to bring the Baylor offense, which sees 2 point guards and 2 bigs, which we saw with that lineup that was getting a lot of work together. And that's why I just mentioned Max Langenfeld as a standout, because he seems to be that you need a guy, the perfect guy to play that 3 role if you're going to be playing 2 bigs that you hope can stretch the floor, but you're relying on them to protect the paint and also set good screens, kind of do that down low work, and then also having 2 ball dominant point guards that are going to be handling a lot of that backcourt action. So you need a perfect guy at that 3, and he showed just great flashes to score in isolation. Back to the basket game was looking really nice, and spot up from the corner. I think that was the one of the things that really stood out to me. He has great size. A little curious about if that is a projected starting lineup with the defense, what that looks defensively. Especially having to deal with a smaller, undersized point guard. But he looked good, man, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finds his way into the starting lineup, just simply because he showed the ability to do a lot of good things, to run the pick and roll, to bring the ball up the court, and also just stand pat in the corner and get ready to catch and shoot that thing if he needs to.
It looked like he had really high court knowledge.
Absolutely.
And while I wasn't at the open practice like you guys were, just looking at the roster, and my takeaway kind of from all their additions over the summer is that I think this roster probably is going to be a lot more flexible, I think, than the roster of the previous 3 years. Like you talked about it, he might have his system that he worked with at Baylor that he might want to bring over, and I'm sure he does. But I think the fact that you have more than just one big, as opposed to as it was the past few years, you have the flexibility to run a bunch of different lineups and a bunch of different sets and a bunch of different plays, which I think will probably work into their favor, because I want to say the last 3 years, Vlad was probably the only one on the roster above 6'10", unless I'm mistaken, because Giancarlo was about 6'8", 6'9". So the fact that just looking at the roster, you have 4 or 3, 4 right now, in that range, I think is going to be really, really huge for them. Because for the last few years, FAU's played just almost exclusively small ball, with. And
not even out of choice, out of necessity.
Exactly, yeah. It would be Vlad at the center, and then it would be
John
4 other guys that are 6 foot. And when they got into tournament play, that was really a huge disadvantage. And I don't think you could tell as much on TV, but at some of those tournament games on the sideline, you're wow, these guys are a lot bigger than our team, which we proved, or the couple teams in the past proved there are ways to overcome that. But I think that'll be a huge advantage this year, that they're not outsized in 99% of their matchup, which was the case for the past 2-3 years.
Yeah, well, also now that it's basically, there's 4 returning guys, so it's essentially a completely new roster. They have the opportunity to kind of have a more consistent type of offensive flow, because Dusty May would always say that there were 2 completely different offenses when Vlad was in compared to Giancarlo. So now we can actually see won't have to, Jacobs is able to basically sculpt this offense from kind of the grounds, because he's having all these guys come together for the first time. And really, the 4 returning players, Trey Carroll saw some play time as well, but it's not they weren't the starting 5. So they're going to be able to work into this new flow as well. So
yeah, no, I think that's actually a really good point because I do expect to see some Trey Carroll minutes, next year. But I think the problem with Trey Carroll minutes last year in comparison to maybe what we'll see this year is that we had to play him at the 5 when Giancarlo was out dealing with injury or when Vlad needed a rest. So I'm actually excited to see how Trey Carroll looks at the 4 because I feel like that's his natural position. Like you said, now going from, having to deal with 2 different offenses when Giancarlo was the 5 versus Vlad, and now having 3 guys who are listed 6'11" and above, I'm interested to see how Jacobs handles, playing 2 bigs at once because or more. Hey, Baba at the 3, let's get crazy with it. But I'm interested to see how he handles the rotation because if we do end up seeing a 2 big rotation, then that means that your 3rd big will have to play in those backup spots. And I'm also interested to see one thing that was really interesting to me that I noted, not to try and get too nerdy with basketball terminology, but I saw a lot of Baba in handoff action. He was actually bringing the ball up the court, and they were running pretty much 7 foot and 7 foot pick and roll. Baba asking for Matas to send the screen and them running it from the wing. So I'm a little old school. I don't really like Anthony Davis, for example, I think is the main example. Like if you're 7 foot and you're trying to, tween hezzy cross, like I'm sorry, bro, you need to put your back to the basket. But I think one thing that Baba mentioned was that he enjoys that Jacobs is allowing them the freedom in practice to try new things.
Not to not to get too nerdy for the listeners, but one thing I was really interested to see is how John Jacobs uses his bigs because some of you might know his really only head coaching experience is in Europe. Bulgaria and Lithuania, unless I'm mistaken, and so many of these guys, I want to say half of the team is international. Does he lean into that positionless European type basketball that we hear about where maybe you have there are sets where your 4 is handling the ball in certain situations. I wonder how experimental is he gonna be with that because where he got his head coaching start, that's the style of basketball they're playing. So I wonder how much is he gonna institute that now that he's at the helm at FAU of his own program.
You know what? That made me. Love my brain sometimes. I pulled this from Coach Jacobs' Instagram, where it's just him posting pictures of them at practice. Because one thing that he's really emphasized a lot is team building and chemistry. And from one of his captions from a post on September 11th was, "Love when our guys smile, our guards dunk, and our bigs shoot threes." So I think that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, where he wants to have that versatility of, all right, my guards can, play above the rim, and we can also have our bigs spread out the floor. Because I think that's one thing that he emphasized in our interview, the 3 of us, was that he wants to use every single inch of that basketball court. And that's going to require your bigs to be able to handle the ball and putting your guards in the corner. And that's also going to have to rely on, a guy like Caleb Glenn who can jump out the gym, or Leland Walker who, he tried to throw down a couple dunks in practice, but he's right there with the finger roll. Which I'll also say, talking about Leland, that guy, watching his tape at Eastern Kentucky, he was shifty. But when you actually get to watch a guy like that in person, his handle with the rock and with the basketball is something that I think a lot of fans should be excited for. But that just made me, what you said about positionless basketball made me think about that post, because I think that's definitely what he's looking to build with this team is just guys that can be versatile and do it all, which, I guess we'll see if that's a good or bad thing.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's just something that time's going to tell in that first game. That's what we'll notice. But just the speed that you pulled up that Instagram post, I'm very impressed with your memory.
Yeah, no, because I thought that was such an interesting quote, because I think that's when we think about last year's team, we think about the Elijah Martin dunks or Brandon Weatherspoon dunks, on the fast break. So it is an energy builder. When Vlad's dunking, it's all right, that's our 7-footer. That's kind of what we expect. But when you have your guards dunking, that's really cool. And at that practice, we saw Baba getting a lot of reps shooting it from the corner. Not too much from Montes or Matas, but we'll probably see a few of those because coming into the season. But like we said, very early. Hopefully we get to cover a few more practices before the season starts. But it'll definitely be interesting to see. Before we get off of some FAU housekeeping, we do have some volleyball news that Megan will be sharing with us.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say our volleyball team just now at 12 p.m. today, actually, they just beat Illinois State. The game was super intense. It went to 5 sets. The Owls won final set. It was like 15-12. So it was a super interesting game. We'll be covering the whole tournament, so I'm going back there at 7 today, and then Molly will be going to the game tomorrow, so stay tuned for the recap of their tournament.
Putting in work. Went to go cover a game, came to do the show, gonna have to leave to go cover the rest of the tournament. You know, Megan's putting in work. And speaking of putting in work, we'll be changing the location for our show starting next week. We're gonna be having a new time, new show. This is actually the last Friday show, you know, between reporting and having to deal with jobs, just that student life. We decided to put all our efforts into this Wednesday show, which will be 2 hours. We'll be aiming to have a 2-hour production. We're gonna have more B-roll, more beautiful production, and that'll be every Wednesday, 3 to 5 p.m. The show will be bigger, it'll be better, we'll be more prepared, so we won't have to pull things up on the spot, but you guys could definitely look forward to that, and we'll be having more promotions on that. Getting off of some FAU sports and spending the last, looks like we got 10 minutes before we end the show. Some breaking news, final Woj bomb of our lifetime. ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski has announced his retirement from journalism, citing that it was just taking up too much of his time. Which understandably so when you're breaking news at 2 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 p.m., any time of the day. And yeah, we lost a good one in the journalism world.
Oh yeah, no, definitely congrats to him, because I've said this on so many occasions. Him, Shams, Jeff Passan, all these insiders have the worst job on the planet. And I mean that as a journalism major who that would be isn't that the pinnacle? Isn't that what you want to do? No, that seems one of the hardest, most taxing, exhausting jobs on the planet. You always have to be on your phone. You're always working. You have to have a network of sources larger than I'm sure anyone listening can ever imagine. Always on your phone. You're always talking to somebody. It's just such a taxing job, and I think he did it as well as probably anyone ever has. Changed the way that they do the job, instituting social media, the way we go about being journalists. He laid that groundwork. So much deserved retirement, but starting, I'm interested to see what exactly his job at St. Bon is. Yeah. I'm not, because kind of embarrassing that I don't know, but I'm not sure, and they were very vague about what a general manager is.
That's exactly what I just looked up.
Gonna be I'm not sure if that's gonna be all NIL, all recruiting, all logistical basketball operation stuff, maybe a blend of all three. I have no idea, but I'm sure however many years of experience he is the top NBA guy will come in handy, and I'm sure that will help a significant amount of the players at St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, so reading the press release from ESPN senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski has agreed to become the general manager of the men's basketball program at St. Bonaventure, which is his alma mater. And yeah, I think that was definitely what you said about that being not a job that maybe a lot of sports journalists come into. And I've said this before, where a lot of people come into sports journalism and they kind of want to be Woj, they want to be Sean.
No, you don't.
And you don't. There's actually a very popular, it kind of went semi-viral. I hate saying viral because it's so niche. It's viral for us, but the common people probably don't know. But it's a picture of him on a pier at the beach, and it's a beautiful sunrise, and the man's staring at his phone. You know what I mean? So it's I feel like they were kind of selling it hard on ESPN, oh man, he had to hold his phone up while he was using the urinal. It's probably not as dramatic, but maybe for him it felt like that was the necessary steps that he had to take to be the guy to get the scoop.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure some of it is
dramatizized
a little bit, but that very much is the life of a top national insider, because I can think of so many times I've seen Shams or someone like that be doing like a TV spot, and literally they have to turn off their camera and like go out, like just like stop the TV spot in the middle of what they're doing to like take a call and then like get that scoop. It's like your entire job is being first. It's, to me, again, like this is someone who like wants to be a sports journalist. It just seems exhausting, like an exhausting job, and like the way they can just kind of like be like the utmost professional about it. Like I can't really think. I'm sure there is, but like, can you think of like many Woj gaffes? Like he was just so good at such a hard job. He deserves to enjoy retirement or whatever being a GM for St. Bon has to offer.
Yeah, so looking at Campbell's University online from their website, apparently the general manager of a college basketball team deals with teams, contracts, players, and coaches, and supervises day-to-day operations. And I think that's just absolutely crazy, and I think goes to show how intense his job was as an NBA insider, that his sort of retirement job is to deal with NIL contracts and making sure that St. Bonaventure doesn't lose like their leading scorer to like a Power 5 school.
I'll say that's like a catch-all though, because it's gonna be, the general manager role is gonna be different from school to school, because some don't even have a general manager. Like FAU, they don't have a general manager. They have a like
NIL collectives.
They have collectives, and they have like a head of basketball operations. It like kind of like depends on the program and whatever they need. Maybe St. Bonaventure in this case like really needs like a boost to their NIL, which I'm sure they could.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to see what exactly his day-to-day is going to be like there.
Do you have a favorite Woj bomb? Because I do. My favorite Woj bomb, and I'll never forget this, was I was up at 2 a.m. for who knows what reason. I mean, it was summer, and I think this was 2019. So it was going into my senior year of high school, or going into my junior year, and at 2 a.m. he broke the news that Kawhi Leonard would be signing with the LA Clippers after there was much noise about whether he would re-sign with Toronto or if he would join the Lakers after Anthony Davis had joined LeBron already. There were, rumblings about if that was going to be the next big three in LA, and he decided to, balance the NBA universe and sign with the Clippers. And then not even 30 minutes later, he broke the news that Paul George was being traded from the Oklahoma City Thunders for what was an abundance of picks at the time, which has now become the norm in the NBA. He broke the news that Paul George would be traded to the Clippers and be forming that new duo in LA. And I just remember, like, I was on the phone with my friend, and she didn't understand basketball, so like I'm like freaking out on the phone and like trying to explain why this is just absolute nonsense news to be getting at like 2-3 a.m. And I remember I had ESPN up on the TV. Woj just having to get up from his bed and be in his office or like drive to the studio to talk about it on a TV spot at the crack of dawn. So to me, I think that was one of the absolute like craziest Woj bombs that for me like solidified his like identity in the world as an NBA insider, because I just couldn't imagine what that text is like. And Woj is probably a huge basketball fan. I mean, he's been
to work that job, you have to be.
Right, exactly. So to be surrounded in the basketball world, and I couldn't imagine getting that text and being like, man, like wait till the general public sees what I'm about to drop right now. I mean, it's literally become the patented Woj bomb.
I'm not gonna. I can't think of like a favorite. I do have like a least favorite that I can think of.
Like you hated
Vucevic to Chicago. That's when I was like,
Oh, when the Orlando
traded to Vucevic to Chicago for, I think it was like a handful of like draft picks. Still doesn't make sense to me. I'm trying to think of like a favorite though. Like I can't.
Well, I don't know if I have a least favorite, but
that one's up there for me.
Yeah, I think one of my most recent favorites was seeing Kyle Lowry get traded.
Why?
Because Kyle Lowry ended up being a cancer to the Miami Heat, but I don't know if I have a least favorite one. Luckily, my Miami Heat. There's really not too many Woj bombs when it comes to my team, actually. So you know, I'd rather have no news than Vucevic getting traded to my team. But yeah, man, shout out to Woj. One of the legends in the world of sports journalism, and it'll be interesting to see who takes his spot. But it seems like we're creeping up on the hour. So we'll be ending the show here. Maddox, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram at MaddoxBlade04 and on Twitter at Maddox Greenberg.
You can find me on Instagram at Megan_Bruinsma and then on Twitter at Megan Bruinsma.
You can find me on Instagram at jd.delcastillo and on Twitter at jd_delcastillo.
You can find me on Twitter at CamPriester247.
Thank you guys for being with us on our last Friday edition of UPress Play. New show Wednesday, 3 to 5, 2 hours long, and we hope to see you guys there. So.